Kyle here from All Media Reviews. Sorry for the absence for the past week or whatever. It just, things happen. I've been busy with twins fever and work and everything. So I'm trying to get back to doing videos, and I'm going to do, I talked about a lot of this stuff in the past month and change, of course, since I was showing these records, but a lot of them are records. Try doing the albums that changed my life, which is not a definitive list, of course. But just going to give it a shot, just an estimation. Maybe I'll do a redux at some point. I don't know. So, and it's not 10, because I don't like limiting it to 10, but it's not more than maybe 15 or something like that. I mean, there's some stuff that I probably did not include in here, and I double dipped on a couple of these, but anyway. So, I'm doing this kind of in chronological order for mostly when I heard them. So here, the first one is the Rocky III soundtrack. This came out in 1984, I think. It has Eye of the Tiger, of course. It also has, Gonna Fly Now, which is terrific. And this is one of the first, not the first movie I saw, but one of the first movies I really attached to. But yeah, this was like the first cassette tape, first of any kind of physical recordings media I ever bought. So yeah, it's not an unbelievable record that I've listened to a million times, but I have a huge amount of sentimental and memorable element attached to it because it was the first thing I ever bought, and it has Eye of the Tiger especially. Anyway, so then I guess I'm going to include two albums. One of them's not that surprising. It's pretty typical for someone my age who grew up in the 80s. The other one was very popular too, so I could borrow my wife's copy, but I'm not going to try to hunt it down in this. But this is my original cassette copy of Michael Jackson's Thriller. Now, this is not the cassette case. I don't remember. But this is it. So, and this was like the second or third tape I ever bought. So, yeah, it's a classic pop album, massively influential, sold massive amounts. It's like, I don't know, in the top 5 albums ever bought. I think 5 or 10. And it had, of course, Beat It, the title track, Wanna Be Starting Something, Billie Jean. Billie Jean was massive, too. Human Nature, which is a song my wife, she enjoys this album and loves Michael Jackson, MJ. She does not care for that song. Which, by contrast, my friend John, that's the only song off this album he likes. PYT's another one. I think this has that song with Paul McCartney, although I'm looking at the track list. Girl Is Mine, yeah. But I don't remember that one as much when I listened to this frequently as a kid, but anyway. It's a classic and it holds up, and the production is fantastic. Quincy Jones both helped write, co-produce, etc., and he'd done, obviously, Off the Wall with Michael Jackson. He did Bad after that, so that was 80, it came out in 82, but I probably bought it sometime in 83, so I bought Rocky III or 84, around that time. I was born in 76, so I was like 7 or 8 years old. So the other one, around that same time, the movie came out, Back to the Future. I was a pretty big Huey Lewis and News fan. I had heard Not Stuck With You. This Is It, that video where their heads are moving back and forth in the sand on the beach. Of course, my wife always claims that was basically ripping off the Monkees. Some of that was ripping off the Monkees. Some of the Monkees sequences back in the 60s on the show. But yeah, so then sports came out. It had like I Want a New Drug, The Heart of Rock and Roll. I knew those, but I never actually owned. I don't think I owned any of those. The first one I bought actually was 4, but then I bought this and then 4. I forget what the order. But this has, of course, Power of Love and Back in Time, which were massive. It basically supplanted my love for Huey Lewis and the News back in the 80s. It has a few other kind of memorable tracks like Earth Angel and Heaven Is One Step Away. Yeah, I even have my initials written on here. That's how old this is. My original tape. I saw Back to the Future in '85. As performed by Heaven Is One Step Away, performed by Eric Clapton. I didn't know who Eric Clapton was. Music supervisor Bones Howe. Time Bomb Town. The other soundtrack I'm not including on this list, because I was into movies and soundtracks at that point. Night Train, yeah, Earth Angel, Will You Be Mine, performed by Marvin Berry and the Starlighters. They were in the movie. Johnny Be Good, of course, performed by Marty McFly, of course. um, is the Stand By Me soundtrack, which the Stand By Me, the movie came out, I want to say it was like 86. It was around that time, too. And that had all those late 50s songs with Buddy Holly and everything. I think I have it, but I'd have to, it's in a box and I haven't gone through all my cassette tapes, but this was one I found, and this was a very important record for my music taste in the 80s when I was basically a pop fan and listened to American Top 40 sometimes and Casey Kasem and Friday Night Videos. I didn't have cable, so I didn't see MTV, but I did watch Friday Night Videos not every Friday, but as often as I could. So then around the summer of '87, I actually have a Beatles cassette that I think I got before this. That was just the Beatles compilation, which has some of their stuff, and I have a bunch of albums by the Beatles on cassette tape I bought around that time. But then I did buy this, and I'll totally admit over time, I have a sentimental and just a large appreciation for this record, as much as it's, considered their masterpiece, the masterpiece among, albums of the last 60 years or whatever, 50, whatever it is, 58, 57 years. Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, of course, it has, this is the version I bought in '87, I believe. Also, I bought the Rolling Stone Top 100 Influential Albums in the summer of '87. I remember reading it when I was at my cabin. Maybe even at the cabin. We went to like a store near there up in central Minnesota. But this was number one on it. They had a bunch of Beatles albums. A lot of albums on there I explored over the years that I wondered why they, I didn't know them at the time. Of course, I got to know. There were a lot of albums in there that I didn't care for, and a lot of the albums that weren't on there that I was surprised. But that particular, because Rolling Stone launched as a magazine, I believe, in 1967, so they were doing 100 albums for that 20 years. And of course, yeah, I mean, it's, everyone and their mothers heard this album, seen this album. It's, been done over 1 million times, but the music holds up. A Day in the Life is Sgt. Pepper's, yeah, from '87. That was when I got, and then, like I said, over time, I go back and forth between some of the other Beatles records, namely Abbey Road, which is my favorite, but I have more sentimentality because I discovered this album as a kid, and it influenced so much music I love, especially progressive rock and classic rock and psychedelic rock, that it just is. It's the album that's the most important. These albums, of course, people have done them. They're not albums that are necessarily your favorite, although they could be, I suppose. But they're just, we're talking about important albums for your taste, your life, your interests. So then, the next pick, again, I could choose a box set, which I don't even own. But in the fall of 1990, when I started high school, I started carpooling with some friends of ours, and we would listen to classic rock and KQRS. And I'd listen to KQRS a fair amount. Mostly I'd listen to the morning show for the sports, but don't want to get in trouble, of course, here, but this is Led Zeppelin's House of the Holy. I have the cassette probably somewhere. I'm trying to not get in trouble with YouTube, but this is the first Led Zeppelin album I bought individually after hearing the box set. Like I said, my friend doing driving to school every day. The fall of 1990 was mostly, and then the spring of '91. They picked me up and we listened to this. We listened to Hendrix, and we listened to the morning show. We listened to, it was Neil Diamond too, but it was that he got that Led Zeppelin box set, which had been issued, I think, that year, 1990, on cassette tape. So he put it in his cassette player in his car because he didn't have a CD. Well, if he had a CD, like Discman. Discmans were popular in that time, but still, most cars had cassette players versus CD players, and a lot of people didn't have didn't necessarily have the whole adapter. Didn't want to bother with the skip protection and stuff. But anyway. Yeah, this is a terrific record, and it's proggy, it's got no quarter, it's got, of course, Song Remains the Same, and Over the Hills and Far Away, I mean, just on the surface, but it really made me fall in love with Led Zeppelin, with classic rock in general, and even progressive rock. It led to my love for progressive rock, because it is very progressive. Blues rock, just rock music with guitar, it really could, by getting into Led Zeppelin, I mean, their whole catalog, but this is the very first one if I didn't like this, I probably would not have listened to them for a long time. I don't know if I would have taken. But anyway, Houses of the Holy, 1971, I believe. So, all right. So then, not that long after, of course, listening to classic rock, I got to know Rush, and I signed up to the BMG Music Club around that time, around 91, maybe 92, somewhere in that range. I had heard Tom Sawyer, I'd heard Limelight. heard Close to the Heart probably on classic rock radio. And then I got sent, when I signed up to that BNG Music Club, the Show of Hands live album, and then eventually I got sent this. I don't know. Yeah, this has BMG Direct Marketing Incorporated on the, because this is my original Chronicles compilation. And so I was like, I want to hear more Rush, you know. And I don't know if I'd heard every Zeppelin album, most of them, but this was not, more than maybe a year and a half, even less after I'd gotten into Led Zeppelin. Then I started doing exactly the same thing, getting into Rush, buying all their albums, but this was the catalyst. This was the one that sort of had me go down the rabbit hole, Chronicles. And it's a great compilation. It has a lot of their standards, a lot of the deeper tracks on here, of course, like any compilation, but it's better than your standard. It's better than Journey's Greatest Hits. It's better than the Eagles, which I also got. What was the name of the Volume 1? Whatever, that one that sold like 1 billion copies. It also does have some of their proggier tracks, like La Via Strangiato, like the title track to A Farewell to Kings, which I always loved. It has the first 2 parts of the 2112 Overture, you know, and it has the blues rock stuff from the early stuff, Finding My Way, Working Man, you know, I heard enough, and, you know, I was like, I need to hear more from this band, and so I play this a ton for maybe a good part of 6 months to a year, and then I just started, I'll go listen to the albums, and they had so many albums, they had like 15 or 16 albums. It was right around the same time that Roll the Bones came out and Ghost of a Chance was actually on the radio. I didn't know who that was. It's like, is that the same band? Because it sounded different. Because it sounded more modern. So anyway, the same band that did Tom Sawyer and, you know, Close to the Heart or whatever. So that was in around 91, 92. That was massive. And that to me, I think actually, if I trace, and this being into progressive rock and class, this is probably, if I chose one particular release of any kind, the most important album to my musical taste. Just because it got me into Rush, which led to so much more. So, even though Zeppelin's really connected, Rush is even more connected. So then it was the spring of '95 at my freshman year of college. I was on the news groups, Rush news groups, really. And there are 2 albums. I want to feature each one, but I was suggested a bunch of albums, a few others, Parallels from Fate's Warning, and King Crimson's, I think, it wasn't According to the Crimson King, it was Lark's Tongue and Aspic, I think. Some other, you know, Yes's Tales from Tropic Oceans, a bunch of albums were suggested, but these were the 2 that I initially checked out that spring, May and June of 90, in the summer of 95. Marillion's Misplaced Childhood and Dream Theater's Images and Words, and I got into both of them that summer of 95. I also was really into Springsteen and Van Halen that summer of it. You know, I still enjoy both those bands. But these 2 bands obviously have resonated and led to so much other music. And while they're not my #1 record from each one of them, they are the most important records for me becoming a fan and then, you know, discovering more music. I mean, I'll admit, when I first heard Misplaced Childhood, it was the first Marillion I'd ever heard. I was still taken off by the singer. It was kind of a weird singer. You know, I didn't listen to singers like that. Sounded so Scottish, really, and kind of high-pitched. I mean, I didn't know Yes, really, at that point, not much, and I didn't know... You know, I mean, Rush, I guess having to listen to Rush, but he didn't sound like Geddy Lee, really. The music was just more kind of atmospheric, a lot of keyboards, and I wasn't used to that much keyboards, as much as I loved Rush. But just over a little time, I listened to other Marillion after I checked this out, and this was always my favorite for the first couple of years I was into Marillion. First, like, year at least, year and a half, leading to listening to more of their music, but it's still an ultimate favorite. I got, of course, the 4 of the 5 guys' signature on this vinyl copy. I bought the CD. The summer of '95, I believe. And then I bought this on cassette tape, which I don't think it's here, but I did stumble across that recently. And Images and Words. And, you know, the whole thing was, I saw something on the Rush news group in '95 when I was going to River Falls and, you know, using Deja news groups and stuff like that. And there was like this debate of Dream Theater versus Rush, and I'm like, why? Who is Dream Theater? And then it's like, oh, they're a new band. It's like, why are you comparing to Rush, who has so many more albums, been around so much longer? And then as I like checked it out and eventually came to learn, because I had Ozzy Osbourne's No More Tears, and I listened to some louder, heavier stuff, but not much metal. I mean, Guns N' Roses, Def Leppard. I mean, that stuff isn't metal, really. Metal was a new thing for me as a whole. I didn't listen to Pantera. I didn't listen to Metallica much. I knew them. I didn't listen to Iron Maiden. I didn't listen to, you know, Judas Priest. None of those metal bands, the heavy band, the louder bands, I always was kind of sensitive to that. I mean, Rush was heavy, but never, and Zeppelin. Although back in the day, I thought the name Led Zeppelin was just this heavy, just satanic band, but little did I know. But This was probably the first album that actually was the heavy, like an actual heavy, like actually I would call metal, that I listened to. And then I listened to When Dream and Day Unite and really liked it. I also listened to Awake. I bought them all within about a month or 3 weeks. And this was the one I enjoyed the most, although I really enjoyed When Dream and Day Unite around that time. Awake I was not into at all. I didn't like the way LaBrie sang. He was too scratchy, too, grindy. But as it turned out, the tables flipped a little bit. But yeah, this was it. I wore this one out the summer of '95. I was like, now I like metal. I'm a metalhead. I never would have pictured it. But then it was just progressive metal. Of course, that was the whole progressive rock thing, and progressive music was becoming more visible to my understanding. I didn't know Rush was progressive rock. They were just a rock. They were classic rock to me, but little did I know. So, all right. So then it was many years. I mean, I could include some other stuff, but I was on my Dream Theater honeymoon fandom, and Marillion and like a few other bands, King's X, Fate's Warning, of course, were in there. But stylistically, in terms of importance to my taste, they varied. They're not identical, but they didn't bring it out as much. And so it really took till I want to say around 2003 when this album came out. This was Delouse and the Comatorium from the Mars Volta. After I've sort of been overdosed by progressive metal, neo-prog. I mean, I listened to Spock Spirit and even Transatlantic. I loved a lot of that stuff, but it was still within the whole umbrella of the stuff I had been checking out. Yes, Genesis, Pink Floyd, who goes back further. I got into them in high school too, but this album really kind of opened more doors to my taste for music that wasn't sounding traditional progressive rock, and maybe alternative rock, indie, whatever you want to call it, college rock. This kind of let me, I can like music that has these other kind of punk elements. And it's a great record. It flows. It just kind of was a breath of fresh air. The Mars Volta's, Delouse, and the Comatorium. And, it really did also, like Dream Theater and Marillion and Rush, and even like you could say Michael Jackson to a point, it opened up my taste to a lot of other music that I found because I got into it. The Mars Volta fan base grew because it came out of the Act the Drive-In fan base, and those people were all now understanding, well, progressive rock could be cool too. Before that, progressive rock was like an uncool thing. The P word. Media hated it, radio stations hated it, promoters hated it. Suddenly when the Mars Volta showed up, other than like Radiohead and Tool maybe to an extent, but they wouldn't admit to it. It was progressive, or was it art rock? And so they really made a big difference to me and to many others in their fan base, especially just talking to some of their fans online. Although I don't really socialize that much with their fans anymore, but I still do a little bit. So I want to say around the same time, this is again double dipping a little bit, it was only a year or two later, 2005, that I discovered the band Dredge. And the Dredge definitely fed off of the Mars Volta fan base. The Dredge predate Mars Volta. This is their album LCL, which came out the year before, actually, Delouse and the Comatorium in 2002. But this is again another case of a band being sort of influenced by punk or alternative rock, but also being, progressive or atmospheric and psychedelic. They're big Pink Floyd fans. They also had a poppy element that reminded me of U2, and I had gotten into U2 to an extent a few years before. So I was like, yeah, this is kind of like U2, kind of like Pink Floyd, but more conceptual and bigger. And I also discovered, like Dream Theater especially, Dredge were a really great gateway band to this new stuff, just like the Mars Volta of, call it the art rock stuff, modern art rock, modern progressive art rock. And, this is still my definitive favorite Dredge album, but, people go back and forth with the fan base of Dredge, which one's their favorite, but, this one seems to get the most sort of universal acceptance, even though maybe it's not everyone's favorite. I rarely see anyone say anything poor about this album. It's great. It was recorded at Skywalker Ranch. It was their second album. They kind of they used a lot of samples, and it just was very unique sounding, very well produced. The sonic quality came out in 5.1 or DTS, I believe. So, but anyway, El Cielo, a concept album about sleep paralysis, and the Salvador Dali painting, which this is used with. They used it, but very important to my taste. So then it was only a couple years later, but in terms of I'm going to put those up the end. In terms of time, it's almost seemed like an eternity. Like it was only a couple years later, but it seemed like probably 4 or 5 years later, I discovered the Deer Hunter, which again, that kind of piggybacking on my taste has basically been within that kind of style largely since the last 15 years. I mean, post rock, you could say, fell into that, and some other styles, the chamber rock stuff. The Deer Hunter were the band like Dredge and like Dream Theater, where they were a band that were doing something unique, even though they shared some qualities with those bands, using chamber instrumentation, using a big concept, and they were kind of a fans band. I mean, you can tell that Casey Crescenzo influenced by the original progressive rock and jazz fusion, but he was doing something unique. And of course, I kind of I kind of found them because I discovered the Receiving End of the Sirens, even though I discovered that he had already left the band at the point that I discovered the Receiving End of the Sirens. I loved that Receiving End of the Sirens album so much. I was like, well, this guy's in the band, now he's doing something else. What is it like? And it was only like 6 months later. And, this is Act 2 of The Meaning of All Things Regarding Misleading, which came out like in May of 2007, or it was April 2007. It was 2007. And I'd already loved Act 1 a lot, but this was even bigger. And it just, both on paper and just for what it did, it's like I could like music with screaming, I could like the core. I mean, you could put the Receiving End of Sirens in there. I don't love that much music with screaming, but I've enjoyed enough and got to love and enjoy enough that the element of screaming, the element of chamber instrumentation, the element of doing a big concept, there's a lot of different aspects of why this album has resonated with me. I found it's still the best thing the band has done, even though it's splitting hairs, of course, and just why it resonates with me and why I feel it's that important, because it sounds very modern. It's like modern music can be progressive, but also have a punk element, but also be very cerebral, and have great musicianship, but not lose the kind of songwriting and the chops versus technicality thing. They kind of found a happy balance, which that's what I often look for, and I think that progressive art rock is probably best known for having a combination of chops and having songwriting and having melody, having choruses, and having interesting, unpredictable twists that seem to all work. Left of center music, and there's so many artists that I've discovered either from the Deer Hunter or reference the Deer Hunter, want to work with the Deer Hunter, want to tour with the Deer Hunter. There's just a ton. So that's why this album and getting the Deer Hunter from this, I mean, I was already into them, but this kind of just put them as a staple. And as they're a different band. They're the first band, and their fan base too. Their fan base are massive music hunters and seekers, and trying to find music that fans like. And I've discovered a lot of bands like the Rain Akindo, Paul Robbins. There's a ton of them since. Kimbra. There's that article I wrote in my blog. It was like 50 bands or something that would be bands that you got into from the Deer Hunter or for fans of the Deer Hunter. The Mars Volta's on that list, of course, too. But people like Porcupine Tree and everything. So that was going to be my initial list, but I figured I just would throw in 2 more on albums that kind of, changed my life, influenced my taste. It's really influenced my taste in music, my taste in entertainment music. One is Romantic Warrior from Return to Forever. Basically because it's really one of the first jazz fusion albums I heard. I did listen to Miles Davis's Bitches Brew before this, I believe. But to me, when I kind of got the understanding that this is music that shares a lot of qualities with progressive rock, with Yes, with Kansas, with Rush, with King Crimson, but it's still jazzy, and the musicians are just at the top notch. But it's modern sound. At least it's combining rock music with that jazz ethos of just those unbelievably technical players that are just totally skilled. And this is the definitive jazz fusion record from a lot of people's takes. Some people say Mahavishnu Orchestra. That album obviously came first, but this album I heard first. Like I'm talking about Intermountain Flame or Birds of Fire, of course. But there's other jazz fusion albums I love. In fact, I would probably put slightly above this if I was doing a ranking. But I can't deny, even like having my friends when I was at KFAI Radio years ago in the parking lot, they were literally like airplaying and singing along to the melodies and the different riffs to this album. Like all of it. I was just baffled. It's like, this instrumental album that well? I'm like, yeah, we do, because it's that important and that good and that memorable. It's like, let's just go over, the Majestic Dance, Magician, it's like, it just, and I love a lot of jazz rock. I'm not like obsessed with some people. I'm not a savant, but I do like a lot of it, and I probably never would have gotten that into it if I hadn't heard like Al Di Meola and Chick Corea on this. Because, you know, Bitches Brew I like, but I didn't grab. I actually contend that In a Silent Way I like more. So, you know, even though that's kind of jazz fusion-y too, but that Bitches Brew was considered like the birth of fusion, and it had, you know, Chick Corea and John McLaughlin and a lot of other guys on there, Lenny White, I believe, and Herbie Hancock. So then the last one is, I can't deny that I have found a, surprisingly, this was in 2007, it was the September of 2007, an appreciation and an understanding and enjoyment of extreme metal. And then this was in 2007, this is Between the Buried and Me's Colors. This is my favorite Between the Buried and Me album. That's not unusual, and that makes sense to a lot of people. This was a sort of a breakthrough for them in some ways, although I contend Alaska they started breaking through even with before this. But it really, you know, I'd listened to Opeth, of course, liked it. I'd liked Orphan Land, but the screaming vocals, the growling, the non-clean vocals with metal and progressive metal specifically was still a point of contention for me. And I got to the point where everyone was talking about this damn thing, and I had heard them a couple years before. I think they were on Headbangers Ball. They played one of their videos. And Opeth I liked, but I liked a lot of the clean sections. I kind of tolerated and laughed at the growling. I just went all in with this, and I said, screw it. This is great. I'm gonna figure out a way to enjoy these vocals, and I did. And I got into many other extreme metal, progressive metal with screaming, progressive death metal, you know, technical death metal, metalcore, progressive metalcore, progressive black metal, atmospheric black, you know, melodic death metal, all those kind of non-clean metal bands especially, I would relate. Because I listened to some technical metal like Zero Hour and Spiral Architect before that, but this was the first band that I really kind of said, I'm going to deal with the vocals, and the vocals started to grow on me, and I got to the point, and like with Opeth too, for the most part, other than maybe Damnation, I found that I don't like Between the Buried and Me music when they don't growl. They need the growling. I need the blend, the mixture of clean vocals and growling to really feel like I'm getting the best of what I want, what I enjoy out of their music. The clean, the album that they put out in 2015, I think it was, you know, it was just prog, really, and it was long-winded. Unfortunately, Between the Buried and Me, I've not really enjoyed much of anything since. I like the first Parallax album. I like moments of a couple of other records, but but this is it, and this also, like I said, led to me to getting into many other bands that used growling and other kinds of extreme metal, unexpected, even the crazy stuff. So that's kind of it for my, like I said, as non-definitive or definitive enough for this video for now, albums that changed my life or defined and led to my taste in music, my appreciation for music and entertainment and everything. Anyway, thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. I appreciate the other people who have done these videos, like Neve, and so Scott hasn't done it. He did it with Pete Pardo from the Prog Corner, but I know Nathan on Shuffle did it, and Neve, the Prog Nerd. I think there were one or two other people that did it. I can't remember if Death by Unicorn has done one, but appreciate those videos. But if you have not, please post your definitive list or do a video of your own. I'd love to watch it. But, well, I have to add one more album. I have to edit some stuff out when I put this video up. It's going to take me a while. Toy Matinee. You know, as much as I can say I got into Kevin Gilbert's music from being a Dream Theater fan, and then those tribute albums, I mean, those were very important to me. You know, I mean, I learned to really appreciate well-crafted pop, progressive pop from this album. I mean, it was whatever it was, sometime in September, October of 2004 when I first heard it. After hearing some songs from Thud and I think Shaming previously online, but yeah, Toy Matinee. Yeah, I mean, I got more into Jellyfish because I got into this, and I got more. I just discovered like a lot of these. Any song that's poppy, that's progressive, I can trace back to being into this album. So I know there's stuff that came before it, but yeah. So a glaring omission that I have to chop on at the end of this video. But anyway, Toy Matinee, the last. Hopefully the last. Again, that's why I said this wasn't definitive album that changed my life or changed my music taste or defined my music taste from. Toy Matinee, the self-titled from 1990, Kevin Gilbert's progressive pop rock project with Patrick Leonard and all those other great musicians. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.